Okay, you fucking Blackgate green piece of... How's it going, everyone? And welcome back. We're not done yet with the prequel era, so today we're going to be looking at the mostly forgotten Batman Arkham Origins Blackgate. Ah, I thought you knew what I was talking about, but you don't have a clue, do you? Well, let me fill you in. Developed by Armature Studio, Blackgate was announced alongside Arkham Origins in Game Informer magazine's May issue of 2013. Back then, I was actually really excited for this. Not only was a new console Arkham game coming later that year, but the idea of playing an Arkham game on the go was something that blew my mind as a kid. Christmas of that year is when I got both games, and since my brother got the latest Call of Duty that year, didn't really get a lot of time to play Arkham Origins. So I moved on to Blackgate, and I really enjoyed it. It had everything I loved about the other games, and it was playing on my 3DS, which was the coolest thing, despite it looking really ugly. On April 1st, 2014, a deluxe edition of the game with higher quality visuals and some added skins such as Adam West, Earth 2, and The Dark Knight Returns will be released for consoles and is the version that I'm looking at for this video. Not to waste any more of your time, let's look at the story. We pick up 3 months after the events of the main game, with Batman on his nightly patrol. Moments later, he comes across the mysterious Catwoman for the first time, and after a lengthy chase, she is caught by the police and brought into custody. 2 weeks pass, and upon meeting Gordon with the newly installed bat signal, Jim tells us that a riot has started at Blackgate with all the staff taken hostage by every single inmate. Batman infiltrates the prison and meets up with Catwoman after saving her from some thugs. Selina tells us that the Penguin, Black Mask, and the Joker have taken over different sections of the prison, and that the hostages are held in the Arkham Wing, with each villain having some kind of access to getting there. With this information, Batman begrudgingly teams up with Catwoman to free the hostages and return the prison back to order. So this is where the plot kinda stops, for lack of a better term. Things do move along, but it's all up in the air since you can play through the game in a variety of different ways. It only really picks up again until after the last villain is taken out, but I'll go into more detail about this system later. Anyway, back to the story. After taking out all 3 baddies, Batman enters the Arkham Wing to discover that there are no hostages, and Catwoman has been trying to get to Bane to deliver him to her contact. Upon dealing with some shenanigans, Batman locates Catwoman, and after a final battle, she is incarcerated by Captain Rick Flag, and peace has been returned to Blackgate once more. Batman descends into the night, continuing his quest for justice, ending the story of Arkham Origins Blackgate. Overall, the story is just kind of meh. It's not bad, but it's not good. It's just kind of somewhere in the middle for me. I like the fact that Joker isn't stealing the spotlight this time, and he has just as much screen time as the other 2 villains, which is a nice change of pace. Voice acting is just okay. No real highlights this time from anybody, but what is given is relatively good. Cutscenes are now represented with comic book style art, which works on the fact that it's for a handheld game, but the art is just plain bad. It just makes everyone look strange, and it doesn't help that every cutscene has no color to it, so nothing really stands out. I didn't really talk about the Task Force X stuff, but only because it doesn't really do much for the story besides setting up stuff that goes nowhere. You could literally take that all out of the game and it would impact nothing. So after all that, let's move to gameplay. The basic fundamentals of the other games is here, only now it's in a 2D perspective and it's really awkward. You will notice the moment you start playing on how distractingly clunky it feels, especially with the jank animations that make you rethink every situation you come across. It's something you'll get used to the more you keep playing, but it's completely understandable if you decide to turn off the game just from how uncomfortable it feels. The more I think about it, the overall structure kind of reminds me a lot of Arkham Asylum, which even though is a game I'm familiar with, this just isn't cutting it. Just to talk about stealth for a second, it's just bad, and I'd actually say it's worse than the combat in this game. If it's not the broken and cheap AI you're dealing with, it's the gameplay that is fighting you the entire time, which just makes every scenario feel like a chore to play through. In an Arkham game. So for gadgets, the grand total we have for this game is 4. Yeah, that's a thing. You can find the other gadgets across the prison in these giant crates, along with their upgrades. Just like in Asylum, you only start with a batarang, but besides that you have your usual gadgets such as the Batclaw line launcher, and this proximity gel launcher which works exactly like that one gadget from The Dark Knight. Overall the gadgets are just fine. They can be fun to use at times, and they serve their purpose well, but besides that there's really nothing to them. To be honest, there really isn't much else to say about the gameplay. Just about everything feels half-assed and could definitely use some fine-tuning, especially with this remaster. Oh. Wasn't expecting that section to be so short. Let's move on to the other stuff, shall we? So we have 3 main sections of the prison with various obstacles and enemies that will be in your way. Like I mentioned earlier, the last chunk of the game changes depending on who you take out last. All that really changes is that each villain has a special cutscene and a specific scenario that Catwoman tells you about, like bombs and hostages for example. So, in order to complete the game 100%, you basically need to play the game 3 times just to get an idea of the other villain endings. I mean, it's a neat idea for replayability, but it's a pain in the ass since you really don't want to do everything all over again just for a slightly different outcome. Throughout each section are small collectibles to break, including penguin cages, Joker teeth, and black masks. I guess I should have mentioned this already, but in order to break objects and progress, you need to hold the scan button and analyze a certain object, but there's just one little issue with that. You're already in detective mode, so why do you need to scan it? It brings the pace to an absolute slog because you have to stop every second just to scan a wall that you've already broke 50 times before. I've been holding this off, but throughout the game are these scannable items that make up a case file when it's completed, and to me, this is absolutely positively the worst mechanic ever implemented into an Arkham game. Oh yeah, it sucks more than the worst nightmare challenges and every Riddler trophy combined, which from my experience is really fucking saying a lot here. Firstly, the clues themselves are really tiny, which is a problem when they blend into the background super easily. The only indication that you're right next to one is if Batman moves his head ever so slightly. Secondly, depending on the case, you might be looking through one specific area, which is frustrating enough given how the map is designed. Or, they'll have you go all over Blackgate, possibly for 6 fucking clues! I mean, this is just excruciating seeing how boring it is to travel through the prison already. For your sanity, don't even bother tracking these fucking things down. Unless you're an achievement whore, or you really just hate yourself. What are you looking at? Let's just talk about something else before I lose more brain cells. Gotta say, the map is way better than the 3DS version. It's still kind of an issue since the map is backward for some reason, but having it in 3D just makes it a whole lot easier to navigate around. Bosses are a mixed bag for me. There's a couple that I enjoy, like Bronze Tiger and Joker. Deadshot and Black Mask are fine, but the Penguin and the final Catwoman fight I do not like at all. And then you got something like Solomon Grundy, which... yeah. Instead of an upgrade menu, they decided that each upgrade would be placed in mini crates all over the map. Along with those, you can find different pieces of a batsuit to put together. To be honest, upgrades aren't really noticeable this time around. It's just stuff like extra armor and a rush mode for combat, which doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. Suits are a neat bonus, with most of them having a unique perk for gameplay. They're mostly reused from the other games, except for 2 of them. This includes the Zero Year suit, which is a deluxe edition exclusive, and the Beware the Batman suit, which I don't mind since I'm a fan of the show. Speaking of reused, the music. It's just tracks from Arkham City and Arkham Origins, which is lazy, but I won't fault them too much since the tracks here are actually good ones. Mainly the Arkham City stuff. The last thing I want to talk about is the graphics, since it's probably the biggest improvement comparing it to the 3DS and Vita original, but comparing it to the other games, it manages to fall short in some areas. Models are okay for the most part, but they fit more at home than a mobile game than a digital title like this one. Environments are fine, but sometimes they can look really bland and have this ugly color to them which just doesn't match well at all. Overall, it's right between being passable but also really lackluster. I don't really have a good segue to the end of the video, so... what are my final thoughts on the game? Arkham Origins Blackgate is something I can best describe as being a really good idea on paper, but just misses the mark in its execution. I wouldn't call this a terrible or even a bad game. but just a really monotonous and dull experience, which in some cases can be worse. From the awkward and repetitive gameplay, awful design, meaningless upgrades and collectibles, mediocre bosses, and graphics that are just plain bland. As much as I like the fact that this game is available to a wider audience now, there is very little that makes me want to come back and play it again. This is the only Arkham game I recommend you not play, since I really think it isn't worth your time and that money can be best spent elsewhere. So with that said, next time we meet, we're capping off the main trilogy and finally ending this marathon of videos by looking at Batman Arkham Knight. But until then, I hope you guys have a great night. Thank you all so much for watching, and take care.